Howdy gardeners, welcome to another episode of Gardening at FBP 2019, episode 8. Well, today I'm going to be showing you out in the garden what I am adding to each of my containers prior to planting. Now there's a lot of science I kind of want to go over with you, and I'm going to do it as quickly as possible. But first, before we talk about the things I'm going to be adding out there, I want to talk about 2 additional products that I add into my mix. As most of you know, if you follow my channel, we garden using containers on gutters, and that system is called RGGS, Rain Gutter Grow System. And we also grow corn in grow bags in a kiddie pool grow system, KPGS. You also may know that I do not buy pre-made potting mix. There are some out there that you can use, and over time we will talk about that, or you can private message me on Facebook or something and I can give you some advice. But my best advice is to make your own potting mix, especially if you can get all of the amendments, the sphagnum peat moss, perlite, a good quality compost. I like to use mushroom compost, but honestly a blend of compost is good to have. And then you add either dolomite lime or ag lime and Epsom salt. And that recipe can be found on my blog, farmerbrownsparadise.com. But I have been asked before, what do you add to the mix recipe? Well, the first thing that I like to add is a product called Cascade Minerals. It's similar to azomite. I've used azomite in the past. Cascade Minerals, that product is made by a company called Boogie Brew. In fact, a lot of the products that I'm going to be talking to you about are from that company. I find them a very reputable company. I've seen great results with all of the products that I've used from them, so that's why I trust them. The Cascade Minerals basically is adding trace minerals from ground up rocks. And this is a soil booster to your potting mix. The second thing I add are worm castings from them, and I purchased their Worm Gold Plus. Now, why do I get that one? Well, not all worm castings are created equal. And the Worm Gold Plus comes from worms that have been fed a rich diet of chitin. Now, what is chitin? Okay. You know that insects have their bones on the outside, exoskeletons, and crustaceans like crabs and shrimp, their skeletons are on the outside. Mammals' bones are on the inside. Mammals' bones are mostly made up of calcium. Insects' bones, the exoskeletons, are mostly made up of chitin. Now, in the soil, we have little scavengers called worms, and they are voracious feeders. They will eat on anything that they come across in the soil. In fact, they can eat 3 times their body weight in a day, and whatever they eat, they poop it out. So if they feed on vegetation, that's good for their nutrition. But the chitin, when they poop it out, and that's in the castings, it's bound with mucus. And once the mucus dries up, then the chitin is available in the soil. So why would that be good? Okay, let's think of it this way. If you were to go to your refrigerator and grab a carton of milk, and maybe you'd had it in there for a little while, you open it up and you smell it, and if it's rotten, you know it, right? Woo-wee. You're not going to use that. You're going to get away from the milk. With insects, they can smell chitinase enzyme. because the chitinase enzyme is what breaks down the chitin. And they're like, oh man, I got to get away from this enzyme or it's going to eat my bones. So when you're selecting worm castings, any worm farm that feeds their worms high in chitin is a really good thing, because after the worm eats the chitin and poops it out in the castings, there is a whole lot of chitinase enzyme in the castings themselves. So when you're using worm castings that are high in chitinase enzyme in your mix, once that mucus is dissolved, the chitinase enzyme is available for the plant to take up. Well, it absorbs the chitinase enzyme in its leaves. Well, if a bad insect can smell chitinase enzyme on your plant leaves, it's not going to want to land on it. So that's a really good reason to use worm castings and to pick a brand where they have been fed with chitinase enzyme. Exactly how worm castings improve plant health and vitality and reduce plant problems is not fully understood. However, the fact remains that adding worm castings to your potting mix are a key to having robust and healthy plants. In both cases, with the Cascade Minerals and with the worm castings, I add 1 cup of each product to each batch of mix. Now I could add more, but it's pretty pricey to do that, so I limit it to just 1 cup in a batch that makes up 15 gallons. And since I mostly use 5-gallon buckets, that's going to fill 3 containers. Okay, those things are what I put in the mix. Now I'm going to tell you about the 4 things that I add down below when I'm planting out, and you'll see me do it here in just a little bit, exactly how I do it. The first is gypsum. Now gypsum adds a bit of calcium without raising the pH of your potting mix, and it also adds some sulfur. Sulfur is pretty important to plant health, and with the reduction of carbon emissions, we don't have near as much sulfur that goes into the atmosphere and is absorbed in rain droplets that return and feed plants. So a little bit of gypsum is good for plants. It's especially good if you're growing corn. Corn can get a sulfur deficiency, and when that happens, once you see the symptoms of it, it's too late to adjust in the mix. That's what happened to me last year with my corn. It got about 2 feet tall, kind of stunted growth. It started tasseling well before it was time for any corn to develop. So my garden guru friend, Bud Endringham, took a look at some pictures, and he said this happened to him a few years back, and it definitely looked to him like a sulfur deficiency. So from now on, I will be adding a handful of gypsum when I'm making my mix specifically for corn. The corn mix is different than all the other mixes because I also add an additional 2.5 gallons of compost because they're very heavy feeders. Now in the case of the corn, I'll probably just add it to the mix, in the mixing process. But the reason I haven't added it in all these other buckets in the mixing process is because I'm just using a very small amount, and I want to make sure that I've got a controlled amount of each of these products that I'm going to mention to you in each individual container. The next product I add, and I've been using it also for quite a while, is another product from Boogie Brew, and it's called C-90. This is like gold to your soil. It's basically ocean water that has been dehydrated, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this one. Did you know that ocean water has like 85 to 92 different trace minerals in it? Obviously, the C90 is water soluble, and additionally, when they're processing the C90, they use an intense solar dehydration process, and they assure that no rain falls on the product while it's dehydrating. So that guarantees that all of the vital minerals and trace elements are in perfect proportion and quantities as they are in pure ocean water. As I said earlier, it's obviously water soluble, so following a rain or a thorough watering after you've added C90 to the soil, to your potting mix, it solubilizes and releases those wonderful trace elements and minerals easily to your plant's roots. C90 can also be applied as a foliar spray or as a root drench. If you make compost tea, you can add C90 to the compost tea while it's brewing. In assays testing for nutrients, foods grown in C90 had considerable more minerals, ash content, more vitamins. Tomatoes had 25% more vitamin C, and carrots had 40% more vitamin A, and there was an increase in sugars. And another little interesting side note about C90, it can be offered to livestock or poultry, just free choice, or even mixed into their feed. They've done studies with that as well, and they have discovered that they were overall physiologically healthier, they grew faster, and they matured more quickly. All right, this third one is a new product for me. In the past, I have always used a pelletized organic fertilizer by Dr. Earth, just a 555, applied in the ring on the top of the container about a week to 10 days after initial planting. I never do that at the same time as planting because I want to give the plant time to get established. And you need to be careful if you're ever applying like a synthetic type fertilizer, like a 10-10-10 or any synthetic fertilizer, because you have to get it away from the plant. That's why it's added in the ring, because it can burn the roots of your plant if it touches it. That's another reason why I want to look for organics. Additionally, synthetic fertilizers, they're water soluble, and which means they're readily available to the plant, but a huge percentage of it just washes away and goes out into the environment. Not that much of a synthetic fertilizer is taken up by the plant, which is why you have to repeat adding synthetic fertilizers throughout the growing season. With organic fertilizers, they are not immediately water soluble, they're slow release. Now, this one that I'm about to tell you about, as I said, is a new one, and I hesitated to use it because I do not use animal-based composts. I use plant-based composts. But this one is research-based, and the animal components that they use are actually turkey poop and the turkey bedding. I encourage you, if you're skeptical about using this product, I encourage you to go to their website and do some reading about what it is, and especially the research that has been done. This product is called Sustane, Sustane. They have several different fertilizer numbers. The one I will be using is a 464. But this product is used by professional growers, get this, in over 60 countries. Now, the research is incredibly impressive. So, let me tell you a little bit about Sustane. Sustane is bio-based, as I mentioned, but it's an organically bound, slow-release nitrogen fertilizer. It's not going to burn your plants. In fact, the instructions on the bag say that when you're planting a transplant, you can add it right to the planting hole. I don't add it right to the planting hole. I'll show you exactly how I do it when we go down below. But that is fantastic that you can add it right at the same time that you're planting. It also has 17 nutrients in it that are known to be essential for plant photosynthesis. Communities of beneficial microorganisms evolve over the tedious composting process, and it is biologically stable. There is no odor at all, and there are no harmful bacteria. 2 years ago, I did a video on beating back the bugs and fungal yucky stuff. And when we got to the fungal part of the video, I mentioned that all soil has fungi, good and bad. Well, one of the good fungi is mycorrhizal fungi. Again, the Mycorrhizae product that I like to use is from Boogie Brew. It's called Foundation, and it is a blend of fungal spores, 4 different endomycorrhizal fungal spores, and it's an inoculant, so you want to add it down there where your roots are. So this product is what I've always used in the planting hole. The other 3 I'm going to show you will not be put in the planting hole, but in the top of the mix. This product goes in the planting hole. Mycorrhizae not only increases your plant's roots' abilities to absorb water and nutrients, but it also just overall improves the soil, the microbiology of the soil, and it increases plant yields. I'm a firm believer in those statements because I've not used it and used it, and when I use it, I have fantastic results. It also helps with environmental stress, plant stress, and just environment conditions, maybe too hot, that sort of thing. So I always make sure that I use it at transplant time. I do want to tell you one other thing so that you will understand as we're moving along in these gardening episodes what's going on. I am doing 3 different experiments on 3 different gutters out there using the control plants that are the same thing, same varieties. Everything, though, in the soil and in the planting initially is the same. So as I move forward in the gardening episodes, I will then begin to show you, okay, here's experiment number 1, here's number 2, and here's number 3, and what I'm doing in each of those things. Now, another reason I'm doing this, not only for just the season's growth, is in the fall, the experiments are going to continue. You know, this is an expensive way to garden. You have to make your own mix, which that is costly. All of these things that I'm telling you about adding to the mix, that is costly. So I have been communicating with a gardener in Oklahoma and with my guru in Canada, Bud, and I am going to be continuing this experiment with the fall crops on certain gutters with another control group where I am not going to change out the potting mix. We've worked so hard to create all this great soil structure, and then you have to dump it and then add new peat moss and such in it. I'm going to try with adding just 3 suggested things in the fall to the top of the mix, not disturbing it, not dumping it, nothing. Just 3 things on the top of the soil and planting in it again. So I'm hoping that that will be a huge success because it sure would save a lot of time and money. I really don't know if it will work totally. I don't even know how many seasons I could get by with doing that. But even if it's just for 1 additional season without having to change anything out of the container, wouldn't that be great? So follow along and we'll see how that goes. Okie dokie. Time to go down there and get to planting, and I will show you the measurements of each of the items and exactly how I do it. Well, we're out here in garden bed number 4, and I'm going to be planting this gutter. The ends have tomatoes on them that I planted yesterday, If you watch any of my videos or you're on my Facebook group page, you know that I love to companion plant and the reasons behind that. I have companion plants planted on the ground, in planter boxes in front, and sometimes I plant in their own buckets, like this is catmint, which deters a lot of pests, and other times I plant commingled or interplanted with the vegetables. These are all nasturtiums. They're supposed to be climbing nasturtiums, but they don't look like climbers. Looks like I got my seeds mixed up, but that's all right. In this bucket here, for example, I've got a few little radishes. I'm not going to harvest those. They will bolt anyway, but I kind of want them to bolt because radishes deter the cucumber beetle, and I'm going to be planting some cucumbers in these buckets. Now, one of the wonderful things about using the products like I have is that they are not going to burn your plants. As I mentioned earlier, if you're using a synthetic fertilizer and you're companion planting, you need to be really careful about keeping the fertilizer away from your companion plant because it will burn the roots. So keep that in mind if you use synthetics. With these things, no harm, no foul. So I'm going to start with the gypsum, and for each 5-gallon bucket I'm adding 1 teaspoon. Now for what I call the gold. That would be your C90. For each 5-gallon bucket you're going to add 1 tablespoon. And this is the way I do it because when I come out here to plant, I'm planting the whole gutter at a time. So I get everything ready in terms of the soil, the potting mix, not soil, and then I plant. Now for the Sustane, the 464, it's 2 tablespoons for every 5. So I dump 1 tablespoon in my hand. That way I can add them to the bucket at the same time. Now I'm just going to mix it in pretty well in the top few inches of the soil. So, sweating. The next thing I do is I place my plants on the top where I'm going to plant. I've placed my plants, and now this is my little tub of foundation Mycorrhizae. This is an Arkansas little leaf cucumber. So I will just dig my hole. Add up to a teaspoon. And you know, really, if you're planting in a smaller size than a 5, I would still add at least a half up to a teaspoon. It's going to help your transplant. And I'm going to move on down and continue. These crazy things. Look how long. They're rattlesnake pole beans. And needless to say, they have been hankering to get out here and get planted. They've gotten tangled up, so much stuff. And I am planting 3. You could do 4, but because I have a companion plant in there, I'm not pushing it. So I'm just doing 3 for a 5-gallon bucket. Now normally with beans, you do not add any fertilizer. They don't need it. But that Sustane that I put on there, it's more than just a fertilizer. It has like I said, 17 different trace elements, and it helps to build the soil. So I added it to the beans too. The next thing I do is go ahead and add my mulch, which is this Easy Straw. It's a seeding mulch with tack in it. The tack is just a medium that kind of helps it stay together, stick together a little bit so it doesn't fly away in winds. You do, if you use this, I get it from Tractor Supply. I think other places sell it too, maybe Walmart. But if you get this stuff, you need to make sure that you get the seeding mulch, because there are some different types of Easy Straw by that brand that have seeds in them. So don't get the wrong one. The previous video that I loaded was about brewing compost tea, and I brewed it actually 2 days ago. Yesterday I used half of it to water in everything that I planted, and today I'll be using the rest of it. You need to use it. I left it bubbling for the whole time, because if you don't, it's not going to be any good. You need to use this compost tea within 2 hours of you stopping the aeration. This is going to weaken and strengthen, and well, not strengthen necessarily, but in microbial activity, because the aeration is leaving out. And for root drenches, I do a 1:4 ratio. 1 part compost tea to 4 parts water. And if I'm going to do a foliar spray, I weaken that even a little more, a 1:5. And then you're just going to give them a good and gentle drink. Well, you know, you're really not supposed to plant plants in the heat of the day or in the bright sunshine, so I came back out right as the sun was setting, starting to set, about 30-45 minutes ago, and finished planting this bed number 4. So 3 and 4 are planted. I just have a few more buckets in bed 1 and 2. I'm pretty tired. Remember, bye, and y'all have a good one.